right, well, this is really cool. Big thank you to Beat Drop for hooking up this really unique experience. Totally cool, and I hope to see more of this in the future here at Beat Drop. Everybody gets into electronic music through different routes, and I'm just wondering what your first experiences with electronic music were. How did you first hear it and get into it?
Well, a lot of people ask that question. Well, like, just being from Detroit, it was everywhere. I say it over and over. It like found you. You didn't necessarily have to go looking for it. It just found you, stemming back from generations of influences in Detroit, from Motown, then spun over into like funk era with George Clinton and Stevie Wonder to some extent, and then that was fueled the Detroit electronic music movement. So we've been influenced by some sort of music for like 30, 40 years now. So I kind of got into it where, you know, in the heyday of like drum machines and synthesizers and stuff like that, and where like the bands sort of like leading up to that time would probably be Kraftwerk, but George Clinton and Stevie Wonder with his heavy usage of synthesizers, and that led the way for the Detroit techno movement, so to speak, to emerge.
So when you got into producing and DJing, was it your intention to make it your livelihood, or was it more of a hobby?
Well, it was kind of just done to see where I sat with it, to see what I could come up with it, and next thing I know, I was doing it for a long time. So it was a blessing that Hear Another Movement in Detroit took off and like was really successful, and the notoriety from it, and the ability to travel, and the ability to record music on so many different labels around the world and sell so many records. I worked in a record store and just saw the explosion of Detroit electronic music, whether it be techno or house from Detroit, just saturate the rest of the world with the releases coming out.
So you left an indelible mark on music production by producing sample albums and sample packs. And I'm wondering, how did you get into making that? Did you make it for fun? Did a friend request you to give him one?
I always had a lot of questions about production and how to get it right, because I always did it wrong. Like man, I made a lot of mistakes, and just, you know, would get test pressings back of white labels and just playing, and like, what? Just the sound was just off or wrong, and just, you know, was searching so diligently to correct a lot of mistakes. Through my usage of Reactor, that kind of like answered a lot of questions and showed me how to make the sounds I was interested in, because it's always like the guy that's into what you're into is always 500 miles away. And like, whether it's on the internet or whatever, like, it's always like there's no guy in your own town. And like, even here, like, it's 500 miles away from me easily, and like, here is the most rarest collection of synthesizers. But it's like always the guy that's into what you're into is 500 to 1,000 miles away. But I think it really was studying and trying to learn Reactor, where a lot of things got answered for me along the way. How does this sound? How do you make this sound? How do you make that sound? And what are the waveforms used for? And then that enabled for me to have a foundation that a lot of other things stem from. And I took music theory lessons, because making like deep house, you really need to relies heavily on a usage of music theory. And you have to know chord formation, minor chords, minor ninths, and these type of extensions and kind of chord creations and progressions are really important. I always say, like, for me, like, music is a reciprocal relationship. So it's kind of like tones excite chords, chords excite tones. It's just really reciprocal. Like, a lot of things that I do just always tend to have a reciprocal relationship to it. And so what I mean by that is, like, if I play a chord, that's gonna have an effect on the accumulative amount of tones that's involved in creating that chord. Well, that chord itself is gonna have an effect on that tone. It's gonna convey some type of meaning or some type of expression from that. That's usually intentful. And once you start to learn sort of like moods behind sounds applied to different sound palettes, you just come up with some that suits you, that you want to express.
So can you describe the feeling when you kind of wrapped your head around music theory and started applying it, like that aha moment?
Okay, I can dive in and get to where I wanted to go instead of like randomly coming up with something haphazardly that wasn't really rooted in anything. It's just kind of like a flashlight along the way of the journey instead of just doing it in the dark, or because sometimes you're not necessarily inspired, but you have to draw. And I'm going to touch on that deeply within Ableton, because I like to misspell a lot of myths in production, because there are a lot of myths in production that, like, you kind of cling on to, and then you get it all wrong. You just go that you think you understand something, or something is said all the time, and then you incorporate that, and it's wrong. And I'll touch on that. I'm gonna tear that apart, and it's kind of based on some things that kept me stuck for a long time. And just had to learn it and just break free from it and see it for what it is, and kind of work with it and shape it from that. It's all about the foundation you either create or give yourself, because like this general assumption or feeling about something is usually kind of like wrong.
I want to talk a little bit about Youthville, the project that you're involved with in Detroit. Can you tell me a little bit about that? You work with youth up to the age of 19, and you teach music production.
Yeah, I teach Reactor and Ableton. Really fundamental to teach both of those classes, especially Reactor, to show them what sound is capable from what waveform, or what waveform produces what sound, what you use it for, what is an envelope, what is an oscillator, so many of these things and the terminology for it. And then we make beats, and then we put that together in a track in Ableton. I also teach machine as well. So a little bit of spillover of all three.
Can you maybe describe some of your students that you've encountered over the years?
Kyle Hall is probably one of the most successful of them all. He was just really had a lot of energy at the age of 14, and he just picked the ball up and ran with it. He had a lot of questions, and I kind of answered from him, and he just took it from there. Haven't seen anybody really like him that has taken the ball and run with it. Really exceptional kid. And then there's a lot of really exceptional kids producing hip hop. You know, they also can produce house. And I'm in the midst of trying to put out an EP from the students. That's already going right now. I have the tracks. I just have to finish them. It's different, like 10 to 20 years later, because like they're influenced by dubstep, like, and they're making house, and I have to realize that, like, you know, I didn't have that in my path to be influenced by dubstep, or so they'll try to make a house track with some of that influence in it, and I tell them, well, you know, that's a separate thing, that doesn't work, and they try to just throw everything in the track. And I have to, you know, you just have to like give them their space to like feel out everything that they're influenced by. And that's one thing that I have to realize, is that like when I was coming up, I wasn't influenced by that genre of music.
There's a pretty decent age range in this room right now. I'm wondering if you think that young people have an advantage when learning music production.
Not at all. Not at all. Anybody can learn music theory. Anybody can learn the piano. I want to shoot the guy that said the older you are, the less chances you have to learn the piano. I want to shoot that guy, because that is not true. I mean, you can learn the piano at 30, 40, doesn't matter. It just matters how much you practice. That is such a lie. That's like one of the myths about that I like to shed light on. That like so many people hear that, and it's a barrier for them to even initiate taking lessons. They say to themselves, "Well, I'm 30, I'm 35." It's always been said that the older you get, the harder it gets. Not true. If you can do anything at any age, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Do you think that like technology and software is helpful in teaching music to a greater audience, like young and old?
Yeah, but it's also hurtful in a lot of ways too. I always kind of stayed away from that, but now I kind of see it. The stronger, the more advanced the technology is, and the more the features in these programs are becoming so important or useful, it's starting to take over the whole creative aspect from the person that's using it. It's starting to be that. It's starting to fuel the creativity. And the tool has always been meant to be the tool. And now it's kind of like the feature set in a lot of the programs and the software and the hardware is starting to speak for the artist's creativity. And that's a real fine distinction to see that. And sometimes, well, somebody will say, well, what's wrong with that? Because you're supposed to have your own brain and the creative process of making music. Like, no one piece of gear and any of its features is supposed to be your source of creativity. It's just supposed to be a fertile ground that you can imply your sense of imagination or creativity or your skill to. This is kind of like tricky, like when you have to kind of see between the hype of a lot of things, because you are being sold something. You have to realize that like these strong features and these strong skill sets that like are implied are marketed to you, and you're being sold something, and in relation to like what is being told that you can create and how you can create it by using this and this way specifically instead of this way. And it's just a feature. It's not your own creativity behind that, and I think we're moving subconsciously more and more in that direction, and it's not ever being identified, and it's taking people with them to where like it's assumed that like my creativity is a part of this feature or function. Yeah, I mean, you have to be doing this for a long time to even know that. I mean, like, you had to have made a lot of mistakes. You had to have spent a lot of money. You had to have been evaluating a lot of pieces of equipment, and buying a lot of the wrong pieces of gear. I bought like, because all of this stuff really does the same thing, all of it. 3 oscillators, envelope, filter, modulation sources. That's on every piece of gear, like 1 or 2 or 3 oscillators, synth, filter, envelope section, modulation, routings, and capabilities. That's like everything. Every synthesizer is that. It's just a matter of how it's set up and shaped, and how somebody, a senior programmer from Waldo, told me that the only difference between all the synthesizers you see is how tightly drawn out the waveforms are and the response curves to them. And that's what gives any of the synthesizers a particular sound. So I was like, okay.
It's fascinating stuff. Okay, well, thank you very much for chatting with me, and I think you should get started with the evening.
Okay.